So we are back today with another stream, because today at work I realized that actually Angular dropped, if I'm not mistaken, model input. So let's see. Angular. Still that repo name kills me, but it is what it is. Yeah, Tayamba, long time no see. Yes, true. I'm kinda reducing streaming a bit. So I try to focus a bit on other things, because I mean streaming is fun and so, but I'm not really fully sure if it's I do it for fun, right? In the end it's fun, but in the end it's also cool if I reach some people. I'm not sure how valuable it is, or how to say, but still I still want to continue, but of course less. So what do we want to check? Yeah, the releases. 17.1 RC1, RC0. So we should have model signals, core model inputs. Add support for model inputs. That's RC0, right? And I think the way we can do that, I'm not sure if I remember correctly how to get to the RC. I understand, makes sense, nice. At Angular CLI, I guess next. I think the next is the tag you need to use to, I think so, to get the RC. ng version, and we are on 17.2.0 RC. So let's go to documents, code, private, and do a nice ng. How do we call it? I mean, the thing is called model inputs, and so model basically, and you know there is this trashy series like Germany's Next Top Model. So let's go with that, the GNTM. Somehow I always go without server-side rendering. I don't know why. I mean, from development point of view, it shouldn't make any difference, but for the demo apps, I somehow always feel like, no. It feels like old school, feels classy. That feels good to go like, I mean, the SSR probably makes sense. I think it still only makes sense if you really go like client facing. So even for business applications, I will probably not go SSR. Like, even though the integration is now great and it's nicely the same experience. So, can I type? Let's open the favorite IDE, which is of course WebStorm. Documents, code. Here we go. Not so sure about the font size. Usually when I stream, I go with font. Mellow 16, probably we go with 18. I think 18 is enough. Cool, so we have our Angular application. We don't have it running because we still need this. So, okay, localhost, boom, here we go. Now, let's start building stuff. So let's open up a new terminal and let's say ngc. I never remember what I have to do here. ngc minus inline template. I want to have an inline template. I want to have inline styles. I want to skip tests. I want to have a change detection minus C, and then probably like this on push, and then we still need the component name probably here, and the component we are going to build is a checkbox. Yeah, something like that. We can't see your screen. Oh no. Okay, 1 second. Now, I don't know, it's display capture. I don't know why OBS sometimes does it, sometimes not. Thanks, Laura R. Thanks a lot. Now it should be working, right? Cool, so we generated the checkbox component. Checkbox component, nice. So let's go and implement a custom checkbox. So what I want to do is basically have 2 icons. So for icons, I usually take material icons, material symbols and icons. I think it's this one. And then we take for sure the done and the checkbox outline blank probably. So what we will need to do, we need to include this inside our index.html. So we get access to the icons, right? And now what we can do is we can say we want to use this one. It's even cool that they have a checkbox outline blank, whatever. So let's take the outline blank. Let's use that here. So that's our outline blank. I don't like the formatting here. Good. Now the checkbox, the checked checkbox. So something like that. Yeah, checkbox. So of course nothing happens because we don't display anything. And let's again go here. Then we say our, probably it's app checkbox, right? Import that, sweet, good. So we display those 2 icons, right? So now, of course, our checkbox has to be a bit configurable. So I would say we do probably a div. That div should be, let's call this, I mean, we don't actually need that. So what we can do is we can add a input, which is now a signal input. So we will try to explore model inputs, but we want to display a text. So that would be like a label, let's call it label, which is a input, right? And that's dot required, something like that. And we start with an empty, we get it like this. If you have a required signal input, you don't have to specify, I think. So now label, so we display that inside our app component. We go not area label, but label, cook, whatever. And why isn't he happy? I think that's still ID that is not happy, because I believe that this code compiles, and it does, and we display it wrong in the template. because it is a signal, right? So signals we have to call. So now we get cook. Of course, it's not nicely displayed. So let's maybe still do the diff. Whatever. I thought instead of using the diff, we could use host directly, but diff also works. So let's call this checkbox container. Don't know if this is the best name, but also nice that we can now use the inline styles, right? So display flags, align item center. Somehow here, I probably have to update WebStorm still because I believe that they support this. But now we have display flags, so it's nicely aligned. Also, let's maybe, so that you guys can see something. Then let's make this a bit nicer even. So let's say we will have a border radius of, I don't know, 10 pixels. And then probably I want to have some nice box shadow. With box shadows, I'm never good. Of course, I don't write box shadows myself. So that's some of the use cases where I find ChatGPT actually pretty useful. Maybe I should specify for a card on a light background. Yeah, I don't want you to write me like a poem about it. Just do the stuff. Just give me the box shadow. Give me the shadow. Boom, box shadow. Now here we have some shadow, which is pretty brutal. But we still need some padding of 5 pixels. Stop it. Let's see if this one looks better. But yeah, the point is not to make it beautiful, right? Nah. I don't like it, but whatever. So let's do the previous one. Let's say we go with a max width of 200 pixels. And then we say align items center and justify content space between. So that would do it like this. And now basically what we will do is we will add more padding. So yeah, okay, we have our basic checkbox card, right? Now let's go ahead and start to play. Of course, we will then ng-if those things, right? So basically, we will do something like this. We will have a checked flag, which is done like this. It's currently just false. And then here on top, we say add if checked. If checked, we will do this one, the checkbox. And basically in an else case, we'll do this. And then it looks like this. And the idea is now, if we click on it, that we then basically check the checkbox, right? And I think this is a cool use case. Cursor pointer, so that we get some nice sweet cursor when we hover over, right? Also, I will quickly put in some padding so that because I see you have on the stream a Angular logo there on top. So let's quickly go to styles, body, margin top. Let's go with 50 pixels. I think that should do it. So now you should nicely see it, right? Cool. Okay. So now the idea is if we click inside our checkbox component, of course, we will add a click handler here. And then we will basically say checked is equal to not checked. Now, of course, we can toggle our checkbox, right? Cool. So let's say now we would want to have that basically initially enabled. So let's first go with a classic approach, and then we will, what is this line? What? Okay. Cool. So yeah, what I was saying is we want to go with a classic approach first. So we have a checked input. So we want people to allow the checked flag from the outside, and now basically then toggle it. So what we could do is we could say this is basically also an input. All right? And now inside our template, we need to say if checked. Then of course, let's forget the click handler for the moment. Let's just do handle or toggle check. Right. So now inside our app component, we could come and we could say this one basically we leave like that. And then bring out or whatever code. And we could say this one is checked. So we would get one checked checkbox. We should also have, sorry that I always jump to the slide, to the styling, but somehow at least a bit. Those small things that we can do, like, so we have one checkbox that is checked and one that is basically unchecked. And we can initially say if it's checked or not. Now, how do we do it if we have, for example, toggle check, right? What do we want to do here? Because we actually want to toggle our checked flag. But, well, we cannot do this dot checked because this is not a writable signal. It's a read-only signal, right? So we need something more. We need something that allows us to set this new value, right? And the way we can do that is with model inputs. So Angular, instead of having this input, we now have model. And with model, we get basically a writable signal. So here they call it model signal. But I think that the model signal internally probably is some sort of model function which returns a model signal, and the model signal itself extends the writable signal. So we get everything that basically a writable signal also provides. Cool. So that means what we can do now is we can say this.checked .set, basically we toggle the value. We can do set, or even better, we take update, we take the current value and we return not the value, right? So we toggle it. And now if we click, we can see how we nicely have two checkboxes where we can set an initial value and we can even toggle them, which is pretty cool. So that's already one of the benefits that we could not solve with signal inputs, because we need some sort of writable signals, right? Now, another cool thing with writable signals or with model inputs is basically, let's say we just take one checkbox and we display here the checked flag. Now, we say we have here one checked flag inside our app component. So we go inside our app component, we add a checked flag, which is a signal of false, right? So if we want to access that, we have to call it. If we want to pass that down, again, we have to take the value out and call it. So now we have false, and we still update, and that's basically a one-way binding, right? But what we can now do, we can use the banana in the box syntax and have a two-way binding. I'm not sure if we have to call it or not. No, we don't have to call it. Let me quickly see something. Would this, because this should not work, right? If we have, let's go with checked. We go with checked true. This should basically not work, but it does. So we can pass down the signal like this if it's a writable signal. Let's see if that also works for the label. So let's say our label would be a signal label equals to a signal jack me whatever label, right? Okay, this is interpreted as a string, of course, makes sense. Now, this would not work because you get back the signal, right? If you do it like this. You see? Here we have to call it. But let's say our label inside our checkbox component would be a model, because this could also be a model. And on the model, you of course get the same things as on the normal inputs. Then it still doesn't work. Okay, so we have to call it. But I'm just curious with the checked, because maybe I think we still have to call it. It's just working because something is there and then it's interpreted as true. And the cool thing is now with the banana in the box syntax, you can opt into two-way binding. But then you cannot call it. Okay. Yeah. So that's basically the model input in Angular, which is pretty nice. One thing that here is important to understand, like this is basically now fully bound to a signal. So in the past, what we could also do, like let's say we would have my checkbox, and this checkbox would provide a value, right? You could do this value, and this basically was then the same as doing this value as an input. And if that component also provides a value change as an output, then this is basically the same, right? So those two lines are the same. But this is no longer the case with signal. With signals, it's directly bound to the signal, right? And that's basically already it. It has the same thing as the normal inputs, like the signal inputs. So you can use required, you can use a bunch of options. So here you could go like default false. I'm now curious what is happening if I have here default false. And here on the top one, I have true. So that doesn't really work. Model. I don't think there is a default even. I also don't think, so the initial value is not, sorry, I'm doing stupid things here. So that would be basically false like this. Right. Now what does win? It wins the one on the top. And then you are again in sync. But of course, you can also have like false and then some options here. So I guess aliasing, like let's go with foo. So of course this still works, but on the top we can see that it's always true. But inside our app component we could then do like foo, and then it works again. That's the aliasing, right? And you can use the same things as you can with the signal input. So basically, if you want to know more about that, did we write a blog post? Yeah. So you can still use the required as we have seen. Then what you can also do is, of course, use it inside effects to get some side effects, right? And you can use all the rest of the API that you also can use, which is described here in this article. So aliasing, for example, where you just put the alias as we've just seen. You can also do the required, what we've also seen. Yeah, I think those are the options, and that was a bit of a short stream, but that's actually already it. So it doesn't always have to be long, but those are signal inputs. Pretty cool API, pretty cool feature. I think Angular is evolving in a great way. Pretty cool. Very nice. Can you think of any gotchas to be... wait, I have an icon there on top. Careful of. Yeah, I can think of some gotchas. For example, generally, we encounter, for example, the case where you have inputs like this can be either a signal input or a model input. It doesn't matter which one it is. But what you then usually want to do, let's say you want to react on changes. Today you would do that with ng-on changes, right? And ng-on changes gives you the simple change object. And the simple change object has the information if it's the first change or not. But in Angular, what you would do now, not in Angular, but with effects, what you would do now is you would do something effect, right? And then you do something inside here. And let's say for whatever reason, do not execute initially, or like do only execute when check changes, for example. Like you start with because here you could start with an initial value and you only want to, or in the checkbox here, the checked flag, for example, you start with false and you only want to execute some side effect, like fetching something when the flag changes, right? Then the problem is this initial run, the effect runs always at least once. So you are guaranteed that it runs once. And the reason why this needs to happen once is because Angular, I don't know if you have seen my signals book or one of the signals video I made. Basically what happens is Angular behind the scenes has this graph where it constructs the whole graph, and that graph is important so that signals work, right? If somebody is interested to know more, like write in the chat and we can cover that. But the idea here is that Angular somehow needs to construct that graph. So he needs to know which effects are, which signals are consumed inside the effect. So it needs to run it once. Internally, they call it active context. It traverses the whole thing and build the graph. And therefore it needs to run once. And that means that, let's say you would here do like, I don't know, do some side effect. Then basically this would execute once initially. And the only way to prevent this currently is to have something like this, which sucks, is like, or maybe there is a better way, but I'm not aware of, like that you need to say run already run once or something, false, and then here you do if this is already run once, then you say this is true and you return, for example, right? And what I would hope for, what would be really cool, is basically, again, I get why the effect needs to run once, but what would be cool to have somehow here inside the effect is first run. If I could restructure that here somehow, because the only thing that I get is, I think, a cleanup option or something. What do I get here? On cleanup. That's the only thing. But I would want to have a is first run so that I basically could just use if not, or if is first run, then return, right? And I don't need to manage the state myself. And I think that would be amazing. And that's probably some of the gotchas that I get with signal inputs. Also, of course, if you just go to this, one of the gotchas, now with model it's cool, but here be aware that basically, yeah, this is actually another gotcha. So this is read-only, right? So if you want to have something like this where you alter the state internally, you either have another signal where you somehow, no, you need a model, you need this. And the problem here is kind of, not the problem, but if you have this, you kind of have, it's like signing a contract with your consumer. Like you are saying, okay, basically when I provide you a model, I give you the option to have a two-way binding, right? And maybe there are cases where you don't want that, because today with the value and value changes, what you could do, you could take a value as a, so you could have something like this, add input, right? Value, let's say a boolean. And this is basically, this is writable. But if you write to this, the consumer will not get notified, like nothing happens. The only way to to notify the consumer is by doing this, a output like a custom event emitter, which emits the value change, and you are in full control. When do I want to emit? Or do I want my consumer to give the option to have like a two-way binding to get notified about this? With model inputs, it's an implicit contract that your consumer can two-way bind if he wants. You are not really in control there. So those are kind of the gotchas I see. But again, I don't have, it's brand new, it's RC. I don't have any practical experience with it. That's just the first thought, right? So, yeah. Cool. Okay, then if there are no more questions, then that's already it for today. Today, Champions League, very important. Real Madrid. We will destroy Leipzig. Have a great evening. See ya. Bye.
Credits are right. Hang up the phone and let your heart break on the interlay. 24 twice. She's on the phone, but she's staying on Wilshire Boulevard. Old dreams dying hard. He wants you to return this love. Breathing in the dark, weightless, working hard. He wants you to return his love. Now he's beating diamonds on you, but that ain't enough to turn the page. He's kneeling, wants to feel known, but he's not the one who goes away. That ain't enough to turn the page. Leash is off, suit is on point. Won't cause a scene or stir up no clash on second thought. Venice by fourth. She's on the job, but she's staying